Hi all, welcome to the next edition of Amnic Cast. Today we have Shirsha Chaudhuri, who is a director of engineering at Thomson Reuters Lab. Welcome, Shirsha. And then why don't you give a brief background about your journey, about like where you are in AI and how we are doing at here.
Thank you. Thank you, Sathya, and thank you to Amnic folks. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to share what's been happening, what I've been hearing around me from, the different meetups that I attend, different community events, and also all the excited folks around me who have been busy building Gen AI solutions. Um, but I would love for this session, Satya, to be more of let's compare notes, right? So of course I will, share what I'm hearing, but I would love to hear as well because I think it's these sort of events which really help us grow at that fast pace. So you asked me about my journey. I would say, I'm at a very unique spot today because I get to bring in some of my learnings which were there at the start of my career as a software developer, as a software engineer, and combine that with the sort of AI situation that we are in today, right? So the nature of AI is today no more so like let's build a model to a use case,
Mhm.
vis-a-vis let's build solutions, right? Let's build solutions for our problem statements. And so I feel like, I've come a full circle, and the tools that I will now use in this second round are albeit different, but nonetheless, I think the ride is going to be somewhat similar, I suspect. So, even though I started off as a software engineer, as a software developer, I did get the opportunity to take code that we had written right from development design all the way up to it going live and facing field issues and having live software to be supported. I come from a telecom software background, so I remember solving in my peak days 3G busy hour in New York, bugs that we were getting from call drops that were happening, right? And there was penalty to be paid for each of those call drops. So really, from that to getting a chance to work with something so novel and so new in this age, I think is I consider myself really lucky to have done this round.
Awesome. But how did you move from a telecom coding into a AI based stuff? Like, what made you choose into this?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of survival, the need to survive. But I will tell you that telecom was booming. We got to do some really interesting projects on telecom. We were, setting up 3G software, and so we were part of that team that was building that out, supporting field issues, ensuring deployments go smooth, and all of that. From then on, I think the nature of the work for me at least shifted to a little more on the services side. That is, what if we were to create location based services? What if we had to predict network failures for the network elements? What if we had to create ad campaigns which reached only a certain kind of people in a certain location? So it's, I think, that opportunity to work with data which made me do that, not really shift, but acquire skills on the data side, on the business intelligence side, right? So that's how it started, I would say. And then on, I think the steps were like, okay, let's build platforms, let's build sustainability. What does it take for us to build cost effective ML solution? What do we mean by ML ops? And now, of course, what if models were coming as an API, and then what would you do with it then? So we've reached there now, I guess.
Awesome. Now that you have evolved into this, so let's go into the Gen AI part of it, right? How do you see this shaping up, right? And you're in a unique position where you're seeing prototypes, you're seeing production stuff. Like, how do you see LLM evolving actually?
It's a little difficult question, Satya. I will confess. I think I might not be able to speak to how do I see it evolving. However, I can tell you what I wish for, right?
Mhm.
And I hope that's a good enough answer. And I hope there are many people wishing for this. So obviously, our biggest tech providers will start to think of it. What I wish for AI to develop into is a little more, it's is its democratic nature, right? If I were to look at a similar journey that the mobile industry underwent, right? Like, mobiles really transformed what it
Mhm.
could do to our lifestyles, and what it meant for us. And it was like, it was spread over several decades, right? So while it improved the connectivity, the communication with family and friends and work, and it really changed what it meant. It also played a role in terms of entertainment, in terms of value added services like fintech, like I could pay my bills, but I am not actually in a at a desk to really pay that bill. I could transact, and I could do so much more without really having to go somewhere, right? So mobile phones was that transformative thing. And if I wish for AI and its growth, it would be similar lifestyle transformations, right? Evolutions. And so, and I don't think it's beyond what AI is capable of. I always tell people who work with me that it's their responsibility to bring me down from this AI high that I keep having. That AI is going to do this and that, and I keep
Yeah.
telling them, bring me down, you know, force me to bear the reality. But I do think that it's not beyond the nature of this thing. I also think that AI should enable us to create a more inclusive world, right? Um, I get an opportunity to work with somebody who has, a sort of a disability. I've met folks with, different forms of not just learning disability, but also, physical disabilities. And I hope that, AI will therefore make it a more equitable world for us, right? And once again, I will go on my AI high and say that I don't think it's beyond, what we are seeing the signs of already.
Nice. Actually, so there was a first wave of AI, right? Like I did advanced driver assistance system, autonomous vehicles a bit in terms of it, where we actually thought AI has come there and it can see everything, and we did actually train, but still there was a delta gap in terms of just putting the car on a road and then be able
Yeah,
to do right. Like, how do you see that in the Gen AI space, right? And
yeah.
like, where do you see that evolving?
I actually was a little bit disappointed that that whole autonomous driving did not go at that pace I dreamt of. Let me put it that way, right? And it could go, it could really, transform again our lifestyle, and change the dynamics of that whole transportation industry. I had read long back an article, Sathya, where it said that the way we design our cities, the way we design our roads and transportation is all about the humans doing it, right? It's not about
Yeah.
the way machines would interact with one another. And that article also said that if we were to make this a more machine understandable machine, doing the transportation, then the world would have to be designed a little differently.
Yeah.
We never got to those angles. It
Yeah.
remained in that league of science fiction, I think. But what I understand is there's research ongoing which is looking to take some of these, the way language models work, but not necessarily in the sphere of language, but really apply those constructs to the way we perceive the physical world, right? So perhaps that science fiction is not so, um, just science fiction, and it's never going to get to us. It's probably is something in the not so distant future.
Correct. But actually, just to put some analogy, right? While self-driving car is still coming, and then there are few cities in US definitely has self-driving car, right? But there are amazing amount of AI-based application from computer vision which has come, right? Like,
Yeah.
what was not possible in the actual computer vision through CNNs, we have been able to actually do where document processing, and we work with multiple AI companies which actually have built companies just by using all these models, right? Now, in the Gen AI space, like, what are some of the use cases you see that hey, it's right there at this point in time, while some of the use cases might evolve over a period of time, right? Do you see that happening? Like, hey, these are the use cases that I think that probably the current models should be able to take care of it.
Yeah, sure, Satya. I mean, I think a lot of you know uh, let me start with, which job profile do I start with is what I'm trying to juggle with. Let me start with the data scientists, right?
Mhm.
I've had friends who are data scientists who do predictive modeling, time series modeling, and so in their world they have started to leverage generative AI, and the whole experience is really quite fast paced. Okay. They were heavily reliant on data engineers, on data stewards, and sometimes even, let's say, some bit of testing to be done from subject matter experts. They realize that a lot of that can happen in a much more in control manner right from their desks now, right? They can apply their intelligence to, I would say, the next steps, right? And to really curate those models which will make sense and help that analysis happen much faster. So that's about data scientists. I have, friends in the product design space who do like 3D modeling of, let's say, body parts of, we were talking about cars, or let's say body parts, or like the machine design itself, right? For them too, I think for generative AI, you mentioned about, what computer vision can do. They are able to recreate recreate, I would say, those 3D models with certain tests already being done, right?
Mhm.
So generative AI is not beyond that then, right? So if you want to really see if this sort of a model with, the different kind of tests that they have around, let's say, shaping or streamlining, so those tests can now be done, in a more limited environment. They don't have to go to a lab to do some of those tests. Similarly, I think some of my production engineering friends, logistics, supply chain friends, um, they uh, use generative AI to do a lot of synthetic data generation to be able to play their models and to see, do a lot of those what if analysis, right? Um, Among non-tech folks, right? I've a lot of friends among the sales and marketing, the account management teams, journalists and editors, and diagnosticians, right? Like who work with data, but we didn't really call them as, like, people who work with data. They're not like data analysts, but nonetheless, because they work with, let's say, files and data, they are able to get answers to some of those work which needed reading through multiple sets of files and go through files sort of manually to be getting those answers. I think all of that is happening much faster, right? These are some that come to mind directly, and as a fallout of this, Satya, what's happening is they are demanding that, their work profiles can now actually connect across systems and get answers to those problems much faster. So to give you an example, right? The marketing team, when they are looking for opportunities to upsell, okay, so they need to study how does a particular customer, or how do a group of customers use their products. This is like a bunch of maybe reports or business intelligence tooling,
Yep,
right?
yep.
And then they would probably need to look at customer profiles and understand their buying pattern, their history, what are they doing, and so there's a step by step approach to identifying what those upsell opportunities are. Can that be codified, right? It's not just getting quickly answers from your data set, but it's also like taking the steps that you did to analyze and do your job at the next level. I think that's where they're really looking to take the Gen AI tooling to. But this is constantly transforming around us, and the only thing that we can do is stay in touch with people and communities to see how this is shaping up for us.
Awesome. Let's just moving a bit into the tech part of it, right? We talked about the use cases part of it. Now
Yeah.
there are large models, and there are like, okay, the models need not be so large; it can be a little smaller. then there are fine tuning, then there are like you could use RAG, right? You have any thoughts on like where you see each one fitting in? Like when do you use like a RAG versus you have to fine tune a model kind of stuff?
There's a debate all the time on this, Satya, and I can only I don't know. I think I can only give you an answer from studying, because
Mhm.
some of these answers are going to be proven right or wrong over time. So,
Mhm.
what I've understood is, uh, if you want to use without spending too much of investment in terms of, let's say, fine tuning your model, if you want to like quickly change the nature of your inferences to be restricted to like a search space, right, like a set of documents or to a set of knowledge content, then you would really restrict it with a RAG and then just go with that approach. That's the, I would say, fastest and easiest way to sort of leverage generative AI, large language models, to give those answers. If you're thinking of a certain specialized answer, right, where you want to uh, not do this RAG, but train a certain model to maybe understand the language of your data set, where this could happen, right, like let's say medical literature. Okay, so when a doctor states it this way, or when a diagnostician's report states it in a certain way, what does that mean? And hence, what might be, what is it linked to? What are those references? And to be able to answer questions with that background, then you would want to maybe fine tune. And this again, Satya, I will want. So this is again, based on what I've studied. So let's see how this plays out. I would say in the next coming few months, and maybe there are going to be other ways to do this quickly. Some of my friends were doing these experiments with adapters and accelerators. Is that the next way to go? Like, can we create tiny adapters with that specialized knowledge which can,
Mhm.
come in the way and then give those answers, and without needing us to do fine tuning or a RAG? Is that like a midway approach, right? So I think a lot is going to change in this space, and different people are going after it in different ways, right? Um, one does need to experiment to see what's going to work for them.
Nice, nice. No, we have been trying it out, and one day we feel like RAG is better. The next day you feel that the fine tuning model that's better. Then you break through RAG to get a different one. So it's
Yeah,
a constant iteration in terms
yeah,
of what
yeah,
works, and then just figure out like as long as the answer comes correctly to an
yeah.
extent, I think we just move ahead,
That
right?
reminds me, Satya, I think, one aspect that one absolutely must invest in as they, experiment and consider the different options is a good test ecosystem, right? A
Mhm.
solid test ecosystem which lets you um, get that pulse of how's it working, right?
Mhm.
Have maybe like test sets to really get that pulse of, okay, with this prompt, with this LLM, this is the sort of approach we got, this is the sort of responses we got. And so then investing in such a solid test ecosystem is, I think, one which is like really a non-negotiable, right? Like, that's going to give you confidence in the AI solution which you build out.
Yep, yep, absolutely, absolutely. And you have been center where like you also see prototypes where people do a hackathon and then it works, right? It works to an effect that you can win a hackathon. To what do you see to actually taking that into production, right? Like where yeah, I did an LLM, it works, and then the answer looks okay, so it works. But then, what do you see the journey towards productionizing it?
Satya, I feel like you have you have shadowed me over my calls earlier today, because these are exactly the kind of questions we've been deliberating over in a few of our meetings today. But we've recently had hackathons where a lot of use cases were sort of proven even successfully, right? Just in the
Mm-hmm.
course of that hackathon. So, like we were discussing, the LLMs are that powerful indeed. Now, what does it take for us to take that solution which got built just over the hackathon to, like a production grade solution. I think my very first question is to sort of build this out in a more how do I say this, uh, uh, so do it in a more scientific manner, right? So in a hackathon you want to get something working and ticking off a few boxes, right, quickly. But if you're looking at this from a more reliable, sustainable way, so then you want to have a little more confidence in the solution that got built, right? So perhaps you want to evaluate the outcomes a little more scientifically, little more getting the attention from subject matter experts in that space to really know that is the solution, is the prototype really complete in its outcomes, right? Are we missing, are there hits and misses? So you want to throw in more of those corner cases, you want to throw in more alternative approaches, and really do like a little more scientific analysis of which approach makes sense, right? This is also where maybe you will play with the different parameters, different configurations to see if you're going to get this right, and definitely with, like I said, different kinds of inputs, right? So this is the very first step, and this itself takes some time, right? So this is not like your hackathon pace at all. So this is going to take us some time. But once you're in that you're in that space where you have this you have worked out, okay, the prototype that was built was good, but however it missed these kind of input scenarios, and hence it has to be extended to also accommodate this and this, right? Like you look at, maybe the prompt should also be a little more restrictive on these fronts. Maybe the prompt should be guided to only take the first n set of documents or whatever, right? So you will refine your solution a little more, and that is somewhat getting the consensus of different experts as well as from your test data sets that this is looking good. That's when you start to maybe deep dive into how is the solution designed, right? What is that tech stack? That can of course come earlier as well, but since now you're considering taking it live, so you will want to know what are those latencies, does this work with the business ecosystem, does this do the answers have to come within some milliseconds, is this scalable, can this handle this many users, does something need to change around that? Cost is a very big question. Will I be able to operate this within my monthly budget for this solution? And a lot of solutions, how do I say this, get disillusioned around that whole scaling and costing aspect of it, right? And of course in the path to taking it live, how do I package this solution, how do I go from dev to prod with it? What are those metrics that I would want to watch closely with the solution? Not just from the solution, but also from its different software elements, right? If there are services which are needed as part of that, which are chained and needed as part of bringing the solution up end to end. If there are APIs from different solutions, if the data is coming from a particular database kind of a service, so all of those need monitoring. And definitely the outcome from the solution is something that we will definitely monitor. I mean, these are like core MLOps principles, right? We will definitely want to know if the users on an ongoing basis are agreeing with the outcomes or are they disagreeing. Sometimes we also want to consider if they are disagreeing, if there are ways and means to capture their feedback, right? So that that can be used for your next set of evolutions. And even as we talk about next set of evolutions, even as we design a solution in its first go, I think it might it might benefit to take this moment to think, do we want to keep a framework for doing AB at some point of time? A lot of companies have some of these concepts as a default as they go live, but if it's not in your default checklist, then I think these should also feature for sure.
Got it. One thing. See, I've like when I used to train CNNs, right? And it was a little more restricted in the data set, where I was able to actually figure out I missed to see a tractor, or
Mm,
on an Indian roads there is a cow that I couldn't see, right? Versus we are still facing the challenge in LLM, because even if it doesn't know, it answers, right? Now, how do you actually figure out how accurate that answer is? On a sometimes what I figured out is like on the first attempt it looks good,
mm,
but really if you are expecting something more specific,
mm.
it might not be there, right?
Yeah,
And then making it actually do what you think is right is probably where we spend a lot of time.
yeah.
Now, what I don't know is, yes, you can catch something, but how do you look at as a data set where
Mm,
it's restrictive enough, right? Because it can do anything. Even
yeah,
if it doesn't know, it can do, right?
yeah.
So I don't know whether you have
Is
found
that
any way to
confident hallucination that it does, right? Is that like very
exactly, right?
confident? Yeah, it is. Like, so earlier today we were asking the GPT-4 model, are you GPT-4? And it said, I am GPT-3. I don't know what you mean by GPT-4. So, it's that confidence in its answers, and it went on to give that GPT-3 GPT 3.5 was developed by OpenAI, da, da, da. These are the founders. This is what they did to create GPT 3.5. It gave me so much, right? But it didn't give me that answer that I was waiting for, and it gave that answer wrong, right? So of course, I think this is most professionals' primary concern, that it hallucinates, and that's why I would circle back, Satya, to my first point, that investing in one test ecosystem is really crucial to one gaining confidence in that solution built with this,
I
even
absolutely
in
agree with you.
even on an ongoing basis, like not just with solution development, right? Even in its live form, if there is a mechanism to test the answer which came out, just so that you've guardrailed it and you've safeguarded it against possibilities, I think that will significantly build more confidence in the outcomes, right? You were talking, Satya, about the whole computer vision space, right? um, the last project that I have, worked on in this space, and this is not as part of Thomson Reuters, but in one of my earlier stints, is where so we were having a constant camera feed try to detect traffic signs. Okay, and of course it would detect other objects as well, but the one that we were after was a traffic signal analyzer, it was called, right?
Mhm.
So we would detect the traffic sign and interpret it, and the software needed to check if the car reacted to it or not. So the camera is actually testing what the autonomous driving system is actually also doing, right? So in our efforts to do that, we were actually like, if I go back to what I was saying, it was actually testing the AI before, on a continuous basis,
Yeah, yeah.
and that gave that confidence that yes, this autonomous driving system is actually able to work really well.
Nice. I think someone is asking what type of test ecosystem, right? I think I don't know if you have an answer for it, like, but I'll tell you, like in the AI world, like in the vision world, right? Like, so we used to run a small model on a car kind of a stuff, and then we used to have a larger model on the server to validate the small model, right?
Hmm.
But we still had a very set of data set.
Yeah,
There can't be more than 50 objects on the road, right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
as long as the larger model is trained, it can actually validate the smaller one, right?
yeah, yeah.
Now, I don't know what's the equivalent of it, because when I go to the person who's developing and I say, hey, and he says everything is working, and then when you look at it, maybe this answer is not as perfect as it. Now it becomes a very subjective one, right? Now, how do you do that is something that we will have to figure it out. I don't know if you have put
Yeah.
some thoughts for this question, right?
I can only add, Satya, to what you said, that the test ecosystem is a system, right? So, which means to say that, you want to cross check those outcomes so that you're able to alert if there are mismatches. So, going back to that, car example, if your autonomous driving system is looking at traffic signals and slowing down or acting to it, right? And if you're cross checking that with what your camera feed is saying, if they don't match and you're raising an alarm, right? I think that's the sort of test ecosystem
Yeah.
that I was referring to. So similarly, if let us say you're going to be using AI to read checks, right? And you want this to happen in an autonomous fashion. So do you want to have in parallel, like you described, like two models to just really cross check if there are mismatches? I also had a very interesting, conversation with someone I met earlier today, who said that, who was describing one of, aircraft industry's first accidents, right? So the system which tells you whether you should ascend or descend is like a little bit of a robotic voice. Okay, it's a systemic voice which tells the flight operator, which tells the pilot, you should now ascend or you should now descend, right? And you also have the air traffic control, the operator sitting in the tower, who also observes and keeps track and also gives you command. Okay. And in most of the cases they are in sync, but if they are not in sync, it's really the pilot's responsibility to absolutely wait for what is that action which is being asked of him. So in one of our most deathly, horrible, I think, air crashes in our histories, right, is when these were not in sync, and I remember that the pilot had actually decided to act on the advice of the human in the control tower, and not listen to the robotic voice, right? Simply because it appealed to him. So, but nonetheless, I think it was an opportunity for us to create such a system, like the system that I was talking about, the system that you mentioned as well, that, can we have in parallel two models which, help you evaluate if you're on the right track.
Right. So I think there are a few questions, right? So one is how to keep up to date in this mad rapid evolution. What do you see the current pains in creating smart apps?
I ask this question to everyone I meet. How do you keep in touch with, the industry latest? Frankly, to be absolutely honest, sometimes it is very overwhelming, right? It's a constantly changing world around us. And so we definitely don't want to lose out, like, miss out on a few of those updates. But how do you balance it with, to internalize it and to learn what you've read, and introspect if this is something that you want to take to the work that you were doing, or how does it influence, right? So there are constantly new evolutions which are coming, constantly new changes. The pace of it is simply mind blowing, right? But one often needs to think that, is this, am I ready for this? Should I be focusing on something else? Should I build out with my, what was ongoing, and then wait to take in these new changes which are coming? I think it's a constant debate many people are having around us, right? um, uh, I personally keep in touch by listening to a lot of podcasts, read a lot of blogs, but I do switch off at times as well, so that I could focus on the work that I'm doing. Otherwise, I'd lose out on that, right? What do you do, Satya?
No, I think just adding to it, like I think I go back to your previous stuff, right? Like you talked about this is a mobile kind of a stuff, right? I before that I lived through the .com era as well, right? So I have seen how, and we are talking over internet kind of stuff. Like it's so I have seen that, and then I think mobile literally transformed, right? When I first time saw that the code is coming out of it, and then you can create templates and make it update the templates the way you want by just giving instruction. I think it's one of those moments where you could create a lot of things, right?
Yeah.
So of course you have to do podcast, you have to listen to podcasts, read stuff, but you also have to practice a lot to see, like, because a lot of these things are you have to learn, right? Because everything is evolving, right? Try RAG, try fine tuning, right? And try creating over OpenAI APIs kind of stuff and see like what you could do, because it could really define what we see over next decade, right? And it's one of those moments that you wouldn't want to miss, but to just practice and do it, right? So I think, yeah, for this question, you will have to be part of it and then figure out a way how you keep pace with it by just doing everything you can, right?
Yeah.
I think there are few more questions, which is like, is a GPD 3.5 or 4 or 4 turbo? Now, that was, I think, for your earlier question of you asked, like, GPT 4, are you GPT 4? I think you said 3, but I think it's a very
Three
specific, I
point
don't
five.
know.
3.5. Yeah. Um, the experiment that I was talking about is not on ChatGPT, but in one of our internal systems. So, uh, but then I think that that answer was in particular reference to the hallucination that Satya was referring
Yeah.
to.
I think we touched upon quite a bit, right? And do you have any take on like how this landscape you see it evolving kind of stuff?
Satya, I
Where are the
think
gaps? Where are the gaps? How do you see it, right? How do you see it
I
evolving over a period
I
of time?
I will still answer from my wish list, right?
Hmm?
All these evolutions and new stuff that are coming up on large language models and its capabilities is all good. I'm waiting to see how it is going to change my life. Right. So I want to see some of those, transformative use cases. And I think some of our greatest minds of our times are at it. So I'm really waiting for those transformations to happen. Right. We were talking about decoding the physical world. Right. Can ADA systems not have to see the world with the way it was created for humans, but maybe interpret it a little differently, like think of it as graphs and nodes or whatever. So what how do we codify the world then like that for them, right? So there are these sort of transformative aspects that I'm really seeking. I told you I do want to see the world to become a little more inclusive of people who are having kinds of disabilities. I do want to see one thing for sure I do see, Satya, is that people are becoming more and more multidisciplinary. Somebody who is, let us say, is a journalist is also on top of leveraging generative AI to do the best work, right? To do his best investigative journalism. Somebody who is, let us say, a jewelry designer is going to be using the best design tools to create this. One of my friend is also thinking of having a podcast session just like this, but having the AI ask the questions or even answer the questions. Wouldn't that be cool?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So uh, but I would still want to see that transformation, Satya, where my life is changing because of the AI that came in. Maybe justice is faster, right? Maybe relief to those that are suffering from pain is faster, right? So I want to see that sort of a transformation, and it's going to be slow, but I think we'll steadily get there.
So nice. I think there are a few more questions. What do you folks use it for? Gen AI, I think.
I missed that question. Sorry. Can you
What
please
do, what
repeat
do
it?
you what do you folks use it for? Like, what do you train and where do you use it?
Um. So, if you mean where do we use it at work, almost everyone at work I know has found at least one use case of generative AI, right? Be it my friends in the HR team, be it my friends in the, we discussed this, right? Be it friends in the sales and marketing team, be it developers, right? Almost everyone in the company is actually using generative AI in at least one way, right?
Yeah, yeah,
For their day-to-day tasks.
yeah. And nowadays the like understanding English has become a little more tough because like people just change, and then you have to really comprehend what has happened in this, right? It's no longer simple because a lot of things actually go through Gen AI and makes like you really need to improve your vocabulary to get it working, right? So
Yeah.
I think
Our DevOps lead no longer does release notes. He generates them out of tickets and prompts, and they are really smooth, consistent release notes now, right?
nice,
All
nice.
of that is so automated. Um, did I just see a question on mapping the human genome with AI?
Yeah,
I think that
I
that
think
goes back to my example. I mean, what I am seeking with AI in the world, and and of course, you do need big tech to be thinking of this, but they also need to know what boundaries to push, right? And so it's from experts across different disciplines to give those boundaries where AI is going to be challenged, and then we can really take it to the next level.
awesome. I think there are few more questions like any new development that we should watch out for.
I have not gone through all that has come out of the OpenAI Dev Day. I did listen to the keynotes, but I'm sure there were other interesting sessions and outcomes, and I'm really keen to know them. I've read maybe a blog or two here and there, but not more than that. So definitely want to know more. That's on my to-do list. I did mention that I follow a few podcasts very regularly. So Practical AI and Lenny's podcast. So those are I usually watch out for new developments being discussed in these podcasts, right?
Nice. I think we have pretty much come to the end of it, right? Anything that you want to share that we haven't discussed about, like to the audience?
um Satya, I think we wanted to also maybe go. I don't know if folks wanted to know a little more about productionizing the Gen AI use cases,
Oh yeah, sure, yeah,
uh,
yeah,
right? Um, we've productionized some. I don't know if you want to call it that,
yeah.
like not gone all the mile, but some bit there. And so um, I think the cost aspects, the scalability aspects, the consistency, right? Some of these have been the challenges that we've encountered. Oftentimes, we've had to think of new tooling which could help us harden some of these aspects. But yeah, these are some. I think I'm sure everybody who is looking at going live with Gen AI solutions will also need to work on.
And just to touch upon that, right? Are you? It's a little more technical in terms of like, do you see hosting it by yourself? Is how you are looking at it, or do you use APIs of
You mean like the large
OpenAI?
language model?
Yeah. So are you? What do you think is evolving into like people
I
host
think
their own
it will be a
LLMs around it?
mix. It will be a mix, Satya. I mean, even the different communities that I'm in touch with, I think different companies are really thinking of how they want to do it. All of them have definitely started with vendor provided APIs, be it OpenAI or Azure or the Claude or whatever, right? They've some have even looked at open source large language models and tried to understand if that fits their bill. But they all, most of them foresee that they will need to create something that fits their bill, and then look at platforms which allow them to host it. Okay, some definitely want to take it from like leverage that in a very automated way, right? Like MLOps has always been about that. The
Yeah.
data that is the solution that is consumed generates the data which is needed to keep the model up to date. So many of them have also started to think of such an ecosystem. I met folks from one of our leading ed tech platforms, and they are looking at how do I say this? Extending the MLOps platform that they already had to incorporate also, like external vendor provided API or their own large language model, but which is hosted outside. I also understand that, from many solution developers today, it's not just a single solution, like, it's not just an API call, right? There's a lot, it's a very complex workflow where you may have models even on the way to that LLM call, or you may have, let's say, you know with RAG, you definitely will have databases, but maybe also other kind of services. Like, do you want to do an API call before you do the LLM API call, right? There are, other services and computations which will be chained on the way to that LLM API call, and thereby creating that rich AI solution that everybody's after.
Nice. I think thanks a lot, Srisha. Thanks a lot for all the insightful stuff, from taking it from how do you conceptualize stuff to prototyping to what would it take to go to production. It's been amazing. I'm sure there are few more questions, but I think we'll probably answer it over LinkedIn or something. Thanks, Srisha. Thanks for
Thank you so much, Satya. Thank you for this session. It was a pleasure. Thank you. Bye bye.